Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Birmingham. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are today, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Today's guest preacher is Reverend McKinley Sims, minister of the UU Church of Restoration in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Each week this summer, we will showcase services of UU ministers from around the country while Reverend Julie is on vacation and study leave. To all who are with us this morning, welcome home. Welcome, visitors. Please let us know you are here by filling out our connection card, bit.ly/UUCB connection. We are building a Habitat for Humanity house in Centerpoint this summer. Sign up to work a Saturday at bit.ly/UUCB serves. Please watch your email for more announcements from our church. For our chalice lighting today, we have a poem by Denise Levertov called Wondering. Just to light the candle, just to draw the breath of a sigh towards the match is an act, a prayer? Can it bridge the gulf between our sense of being, node, synapse, locus of hidden counsels, and the multitudinous force of world?
Our opening hymn is number 318 in the gray hymnal, if you have one of those. We Would Be One. The music and the lyrics will be shared to your screen.
We would be one, as now we join in singing our hymn of love, to pledge ourselves anew.
church is supported by those who call our church home and by those who support the efforts of our church to change our world for the better. We share our cash plate every Sunday with organizations whose work reflects UU values to care for marginalized persons, advocate for real and systemic change, defend our environment, and promote justice and equity for all. This month's Share the Plate recipient is Alabama Interfaith Refugee Partnership, an organization birthed out of our own congregation that helps refugees resettle in Birmingham. During this time of social distancing and online worship, please know that church expenses continue. Therefore, we very much appreciate your continuing to pay your pledge or offer your donation by either mailing a check to the church office or by using PayPal or Venmo. Our Venmo account is at UUCBHAM. Please designate whether your offering is for UUCB or AIRP. Thank you for your generous support of our church and our Share the Plate recipient. May we give in love and in hope.
using the chat feature in YouTube, by speaking aloud, or hearing it in your heart. Please give voice to what is on your heart today. For today's meditation, we have another poem by Denise Levertov. This one is called A Silence. Among its petals, the rose still holds a few tears of the morning rain that broke from its stem. In each shines a speck of red light, darker even than the rose. Phoenix-tailed, slate-blue martins pursue one another, spaced out in hopeless hope, circling the porous clay vase, dark from the water in it. Silence surrounds the facts, a language still unspoken.
Hello to all of the young and young at heart, and welcome to A Time for All Ages. Since this week's theme is all about disorientation, I thought that I'd read to you from one of my favorite children's books, The BFG by Roald Dahl. Chapter 1, The Witching Hour. Sophie couldn't sleep. A brilliant moonbeam was slanting through a gap in the curtains. It was shining right on her pillow. The other children in the dormitory had been asleep for hours. Sophie closed her eyes and lay quite still. She tried very hard to doze off. It was no good. The moonbeam was like a silver blade slicing through the room onto her face. The house was absolutely silent. No voices came up from downstairs. There were no footsteps on the floor above either. The window behind the curtain was wide open, but nobody was walking on the pavement outside. No cars went by on the street. Not the tiniest sound could be heard anywhere. Sophie had never known such a silence. Perhaps, she told herself, this was what they called the witching hour. The witching hour, somebody had once whispered to her, was a special moment in the middle of the night when every child and every grown-up was in a deep, deep sleep, and all the dark things came out from hiding and had the world to themselves. The moonbeam was brighter than ever on Sophie's pillow. She decided to get out of bed and close the gap in the curtains. You got punished if you were caught out of bed after lights out. Even if you said you had to go to the lavatory, that was not accepted as an excuse, and they punished you just the same. But there was no one about now. Sophie was sure of that. She reached out for her glasses that lay on the chair beside her bed. They had steel rims and very thick lenses, and she could hardly see a thing without them. She put them on, then she slipped out of the bed and tiptoed over to the window. When she reached the curtains, Sophie hesitated. She longed to duck underneath them and lean out of the window to see what the world looked like now that the witching hour was at hand. She listened again. Everywhere it was deathly still. The longing to look out became so strong she couldn't resist it. Quickly, she ducked under the curtains and leaned out of the window. In the silvery moonlight, the village street she knew so well seemed completely different. The houses looked bent and crooked, like houses in a fairy tale. Everything was pale and ghostly and milky white. Across the road, she could see Mrs. Rance's shop, where you bought buttons and wool and bits of elastic. It didn't look real. There was something dim and misty about that, too. Sophie allowed her eye to travel further and further down the street. Suddenly, she froze. There was something coming up the street on the opposite side. It was something black, something tall and black, something very tall and very black and very thin. It wasn't a human. It couldn't be. It was 4 times as tall as the tallest human. It was so tall its head was higher than the upstairs windows of the houses. Sophie opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat, like her whole body, was frozen with fright. This was the witching hour, all right. The tall black figure was coming her way. It was keeping very close to the houses across the street, hiding in the shadowy places where there was no moonlight. On and on it came, nearer and nearer, but it was moving in spurts. It would stop, then it would move on, then it would stop again. But what on earth was it doing? Aha! Sophie could see now what it was up to. It was stopping in front of each house. It would stop and peer into the upstairs window of each house in the street. It actually had to bend down to peer into the upstairs windows. That's how tall it was. It would stop and peer in. Then it would slide on to the next house and stop again and peer in, and so on, all along the street. It was much closer now, and Sophie could see it more clearly. Looking at it carefully, she decided it had to be some kind of a person. Obviously, it was not a human, but it was definitely a person. A giant person, perhaps. Sophie stared hard across the misty moonlit street. The giant, if that was what he was wearing a long black cloak. In one hand, he was holding what looked like a very long, thin trumpet. In the other hand, he held a large suitcase. The giant had stopped now right in front of Mr. and Mrs. Gucci's house. The Guccis had a greengrocer's shop in the middle of the high street, and the family lived above the shop. The 2 Gucci children slept in the upstairs front room, and Sophie knew that. The giant was peering through the window into the room where Michael and Jane Gucci were sleeping. From across the street, Sophie watched and held her breath. She saw the giant step back a pace and put the suitcase down on the pavement. He bent over and opened the suitcase. He took something out of it. It looked like a glass jar, one of those square ones with a screw top. He unscrewed the top of the jar and poured what was in it into the end of a long trumpet thing. Sophie watched, trembling. She saw the giant straighten up again, and she saw him poke the trumpet in through the open upstairs window of the room where the Gucci children were sleeping. She saw the giant take a deep breath, and whoof, he blew through the trumpet. No noise came out, but it was obvious to Sophie that whatever had been in the jar had now been blown through the trumpet into the Gucci children's bedroom. What could it be? As the giant withdrew the trumpet from the window and bent down to pick up the suitcase, he happened to turn his head and glance across the street. In the moonlight, Sophie caught a glimpse of an enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face with the most enormous ears. The nose was as sharp as a knife, and above the nose there were two bright, flashing eyes, and the eyes were staring straight at Sophie. There was a fierce and devilish look about them. Sophie gave a yelp and pulled back from the window. She flew across the dormitory and jumped into her bed and hid under the blanket. And there she crouched, still as a mouse and tingling all over. So many of my favorite books that I read when I was your age were about going on adventures. And all of these adventures started with a sense of disorientation, traveling to some new world, whether it was going through a looking glass or down a rabbit hole, through a wardrobe, or being taken from your bed at night by a big friendly giant. And what I learned from all of these books was that even though sometimes adventures can be very scary, they can also lead to learning new things and meeting new friends and learning how brave you really can be. So I hope that whenever the world feels a little bit disorienting to you, you'll see it as a new adventure. Thank you.
And now let's sing our principal song together. One, each person is worthwhile. Two, be kind in all you do. Three, we help each other learn. Four, and search for what is true. Five, all people get a vote. Six, build a just and peaceful world. Seven, we take care of the earth. That will bring us back to me and you too.
In our tradition, we often start with a bell ringing, as you may have done here, or the lighting of a chalice or a candle. So if you didn't do that earlier, I invite you to grab a candle now and light one with me as I read some of these words that will help frame our homily this morning. We light a candle in our tradition of Unitarian Universalism to symbolize that even when we are apart, when we partake in a ritual together, we are together. One of our religious strands of Christianity speaks that whenever two or three are gathered together, there the Spirit is also. Even if we are only connected through Zoom screens and fiber optic cables and the wonderful magic of Wi-Fi, we are still together, friends. I take a lot of heart in that these days. So I want to share with you this reading about what it is to be in today's America. A reading called The Womb of Stars from Joy Atkinson. She writes, "The womb of stars embraces us. Remnants of their fiery furnaces pulse through our veins. We are of the stars, the dust of explosions cast across space. We are of the earth. We breathe and live in the breath of ancient plants and beasts. Their cells nourish the soil. We build our communities on their harvest of gifts. Our fingers trace the curves carved in clay and stone by forebears unknown to us. We are a part of the great circle of humanity gathered around the fire, the hearth, the altar. We gather anew this day to celebrate our common heritage. May we recall in gratitude all that has given us birth." Would you take a breath with me? This is a story about birth. My homily today speaks to the feelings that I have been experiencing, that my congregation at Restoration in Philadelphia has been experiencing, that many of us, especially white folks, have been experiencing, feelings born out of the pandemic and of the uprisings for racial justice over the past 18 months. These are feelings that my Black and brown siblings have been experiencing the past 4 years in heightened awareness, and indeed, for our whole lives. I feel like we in America, for the past 18 months, for the past 4 years, some of us for our whole lives, have been in the midst of a great discomfort. For those folks who look like me, it has always been a time and place of comfort to be and live here in America. And the past 5 years or so have turned that on its head for many of us who are well-meaning white folks. It is a time of discomfort now for many of us. And this story starts where we're born. There's a theory in the adult model of education that I have learned. It says that as you grow from an adult to an adult from youth, you learn your ways of being in the world. You learn your culture, your ways of socializing with other humans, that you learn how to be from your family of origin, from the culture in which you grew up, the time and place and context of your birth. That's how you learn how to be in the world. But at some point, when you leave that family of origin, or when you leave your world, that original cultural bubble of your youth. And for me, if you can't tell by my accent, I'm from West Texas. And when I left the bubble of West Texas, I was confronted with a new world that my upbringing, my family of origin, and my white, Eurocentric, heteronormative, nominally Christian culture did not prepare me for. I experienced what we call in this adult model of education a disorienting dilemma. A disorienting dilemma. That's where all the tips and the tricks and the trades, all the techniques that your culture taught you growing up, all the stuff that was taught of how to be in the world, all of a sudden they don't work for you anymore. All of a sudden they don't make sense in this new reality with which you are faced. For white folks like me, when we look at the America that we thought we knew, President Obama's America, and find out that it's not as great as we were taught by that family of origin or by that original culture, we experience a disorienting dilemma. When we look at the America that we thought we knew, our Black and brown siblings, our queer and disabled siblings, all the siblings who have been marginalized by my culture in this country, for y'all, this is the America you've always known. For you, there is no disorienting dilemma. So it might be that you were watching the folks who look like me have the dilemma, and you've been trying to reorient us, doing that emotional labor and having a hard time believing that white folks don't know or can't know the best way to do things. To experience that kind of message can be disorienting, because that's the message that you've been hearing and taught through all the channels of white supremacy culture, and how all of that filters into our brains and affects all of us regardless of our skin color. I think many folks in UU congregations know this feeling of disorientation, because as people who come from different religious backgrounds, to be in one body, to worship in one service, we oftentimes experience these dilemmas too. We have to learn how to make sense of a new reality that mashes spiritual traditions, beliefs about God, various brands of liberal politics, let's be honest, y'all, and a robust distrust of religious authority. My prayer for today is for strength and courage for those of us who are feeling disoriented, that we might dive a little further into that disorientation with courage and vulnerability. Yes, dive further in, friends, because when you are confronted with a disorienting dilemma, I have been taught and I have experienced and come through, there are two options for how you can respond. One, you can keep leaning on your old patterns, your old tips and techniques, tools of the trade for how to get by and how to be, even though they no longer serve you. Keep repeating the same patterns that do not work And friends, you will get stuck. You will be in conflict for the rest of your days and be constantly disoriented. Or you can work to identify those tools and tips and techniques of how you grew up, of what you were taught, analyze why you were taught, what you were taught, why you grew up the way you did. If you can analyze and identify where you got these and how they had served you up until this point of disorientation, then you can start to dismantle them. Take the problematic ones, the ones that aren't working anymore, the ones that otherize people, the ones that disassociate you from the marginalized parts of your community. You can toss those aside and start learning new ways of being, birth new ways of being into existence. It's what we learn how to do in UU spaces, especially, but as human beings. Many folks who come to our congregations have to learn to do this. It's what folks who move from a homogeneous situation to a heterogeneous situation, especially a multiracial situation, especially here in America, especially in 2021. It's what we have to learn to do. Friends, we have to find new ways of being in this new understanding of the world. It's our call to liberation. In my own personal faith tradition of Christianity, we talk about the people being gathered together as one body. We call it the body of Christ. And if there are ways that we have to learn to be in this new body that takes into account all the various levels of power and imbalance and inequity, to learn to be together in a new body, we experience this disorienting dilemma in this heterogeneous situation. But with that disorientation and the discomfort and the tension, especially for folks who look like me, white people in America, with that tension and discomfort and disorientation comes the opportunity and the invitation. Friends, the only way out is to dive further in, to go through the disorientation. Because from the tension, from the disruption, from the feelings of unease, from the cramping and the contractions, as any mother will tell you, comes the new body being birthed, where the new life and the new ways of being are waiting to emerge. Friends, that is the interdependent web of all existence in action. The liberation is born when we go through the discomfort, not away from it. Saying that we should not talk about those things, that it makes me too uncomfortable, it's not my fault. This is the invitation. The only way out is through, my friends. So I hope you will join me in a moment of prayer or reflection as we think of these new ways to be, and as we face with courage our disorienting dilemma on how to make America great together. Would you be with me in a spirit of prayer? Holy Spirit, who goes by many names and by none, who speaks through acts of love and justice, who works creatively within our hands, within the movements of the planets, within the stirrings of the earth and the moral arc of the universe that bends towards justice. May we be a part of that bending. May we be on the path that leads towards a beloved community, towards a multiracial, heterogeneous community where there is no disorienting dilemma. There is only an orientation towards love, towards peace, towards grace. May we be filled with strength and courage to dive deeper into the tension, to not shy away from hard conversations, especially the hard conversations that happen inside of our own heads. May we be filled with resolve to do the hard work, to understand what is happening to our siblings of color, our siblings who have been marginalized by who they are or what their body looks like. May we find peace to give to ourselves when we feel guilt. Because feeling guilt is natural, y'all, but it is not productive and it is not food for transformation. May the peace and forgiveness that we give to ourselves be transformed into responsibility and action. Responsibility to understand the world for how it is for those who do not look or pray like us. Responsibility to teach those who need a little help to learn about privilege and fragility. Responsibility to always act with the greatest love as our best guiding principle. May we learn new ways of being part of this great body, and may our discomfort breed new kinds of life out of the tension and discomfort. Amen. Friends, I invite you to put your hands on your heart as we end with this meditation. Feel the heartbeat of your own body. You who are created in the image of God, meaning the divine spark resides within you. The indwelling, an incarnation of holiness within you. As your heart beats, what is it calling out to you? How is it speaking to you? What is it asking you to learn? I invite you to move your hands to your stomach. See if you can feel your heartbeat even there. As your body is connected by the blood that courses through your veins, reminding you that you are connected and we are connected within our own body, the body of the UUA, the body of our congregations, the body of humanity, gathered around the fire, the hearth, the altar. We are connected not just by the internet, but we are connected to one another, to the indwelling of spirit within one another. And that we are connected to all the bodies, all the plants and animals, connected to the stars in the sky, the water in the seas. All of life is connected. I want you to move your hands to your temples, to feel your heartbeat in your mind and in your head. You who are endowed with intelligence and wit and humor and sarcasm and love, the ability to solve problems, the ability to choose new ways of being. May we be reminded to use our powers for community, for justice, and above all, for love. I invite you to put your hands back on your heart. Feel your rhythm, the divine within you, the divine within me. May we honor the call of that divine. Seek liberation. Work for justice and peace. And abide in that great love. May it be so. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. Feel free to sing along.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing